Matt, you said pre-show that today, right now, in the end of 2024, it is the cheapest time ever to invest in real estate or to buy a house. I hope you're wrong, but why do you believe that?
I think the supply and demand imbalance with people and housing is so out of whack that we can't build houses fast enough to ever bring the prices back down. And if you take just the basic organic demand of people, just people that live here, born and raised here, that need houses, that's one element of demand. That's bigger than it's ever been in the history of our country. But then you add 12.5 million new residents to come on over the southern border. The last 3 or 4 years, they need a place to live. Then you have the corporations snatching up houses as fast as they can. That's a whole new different level of demand. And then you got new home builders who are very confident about the market, but they're not building homes fast enough. And the ones that they are building, they're not building them to sell, they're building them to rent. And when you have all of those different factors converging on one industry, prices can only go one direction, and that's up.
Well, so let me push back. I'm not going to push back on your expertise, but as the guy on this side of the microphone and the camera, like house prices are insane. They're stupid. I live in Nashville, one of the most expensive real estate markets in the country right now. And we're in the process this year of, by the time this is done, it'll be over, but we're purchasing a house for my family that my grandparents built in the 60s. And the price per foot is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And what makes it even less sense to me is that a house right down the street, and this is a small home, this is a small 1,800 square foot ranch home built in the 60s, and we're buying it to keep it in the family, right? That's the point. But there's a house down the street that's smaller that sold for more than what this one sold for and has small. I don't understand it. There seems to me like we've reached the point of absurdity and how much it costs per foot. And so as a consumer, like just looking at it, I would love for everything to be corrected back to a realistic number.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, as an investor, I don't want that to happen because I lose money. But do you believe that there's even the potential of a correction?
I mean, there's always a potential, right? If there is a correction, it won't be because of anything that we've experienced in the housing market before. It's going to be a black swan type of event. It's going to be something that we didn't see coming. When in 2008, no one, general population, had no idea what the secondary market was, right? And so we had all the shenanigans going on there in the secondary market, which was a big catalyst for that crash. And I think if it crashes again, it'll be something else that none of us know anything about that's going on. But one thing that you said, yes, it's consumers competing with consumers is how it's always been, and that can only go so high, right? People only make so much money to afford so much house, but the consumer is not competing with just the consumer anymore. The consumer is competing with the corporations, and it's BlackRock or Blackstone. I think Blackstone is the bigger real estate one, but they both are involved. But they're on track to own 60% of all single family homes within the next 10 years.
Mm.
So you're not, like, how could prices keep going up? No one can afford them. Well, you're not competing with just everyone. You're competing with corporations that have bottomless pockets.
So I'm a unashamed capitalist. I believe in capitalism 100%. I want a limited government intervention. I don't want any government really telling me much of anything at all. But I believe that there's at least an argument to be made that these corporations that are buying up these homes, that it is bad for the American public and it's bad for the future. And I think that obviously it's an arguable point that people could debate. I before we bought this home, the family home that we moved in here to buy this home, but before we did that, we were renting from a huge REIT. I'm not going to name them, but I hate them. I hated them. We were renting from them, and we thought we'd rent forever. Like we've got investment properties. We thought, well, let's just rent. We'll do what Grant Cardone says is stupid to own a home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I disagree now with him after renting for a while. I'd rather own my own thing, even if it's not following the investment rules. But I hated them. They treated us like flipping cattle. They wouldn't do anything. They continued to increase rents year after year after year for no reason. I believe that there's got to be something that can be done to prevent that. Because when you said they own 60% of single families, that makes me want to puke. What's your opinions about that?
Yeah, I mean, we can argue all we want around, not even argue, just debate the morality of it. But you being the consummate capitalist and loving our system, there's people with add a couple zeros to their net worth and they love it just as much,
Yeah.
right? So they're playing a different game, and that's the game they're playing right now. There was something came out, and I might mess up this, but I'll make the point, but I might have the stats a little bit wrong. But you know, BlackRock is like when we're funding the war in Ukraine, right? So BlackRock owns between BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. They own, I think it's like 80% of the S&P 500, which is just ridiculous. And then so and when we fund something like a war in Ukraine, and pick whatever cause it is, but you send that type of capital because you're going to support. It actually doesn't go to Ukraine. It goes to the companies that go and fulfill it to Ukraine. And so there was something where saying that they're going to get all of this money and it was all going to eventually hit BlackRock. And then BlackRock just got all the contracts to actually rebuild Ukraine after the war. So it's like they're playing this game. They're running out of things to do with their money. And so this next logical path or this next thing for them to go after would be housing. And now they're going after foreign housing as well. It's one of the basic needs of humanity. So, you got oxygen, food, and, water and shelter. So, there's built-in demand for basically eternity. So invest in one of those things and you'll be okay.
We're talking with Matt Theriault on the root of all success today. He's a 15-year successful music business entrepreneur, record producer, label owner, also a U.S. Marine Corps Desert Storm veteran. Thank you for your service. And he went from making 7 figures a year to $7 an hour when everything dropped out and record stores closed down. Man, what was that like? I mean, how did you manage moving from bringing in $1 million plus a year to $7 an hour?
It wasn't easy. I blamed everybody and everything for my demise. And in hindsight, it's crystal clear what happened. But when it was happening, it was not clear at all. It was like, what the hell is going on? You know, the when you make your money selling compact discs and people stop buying those compact discs and you have no idea why they're not buying them anymore. Like, what happened? Music just go out of fashion. And then you hear about this little company called Napster. And you're like,
Wow.
what is a Napster? When even the internet wasn't like the thing. Like, I don't even think we had a website at the time. Like, that's how new the internet was. And we had a small independent hip hop label, but that independent music listener, whether it was independent rap, independent rock, independent dance, independent country, whatever it may be, the independent music listener embraced that digital download faster than anybody else. That we were all out of business before iTunes was even a word. And so then when that happens so quickly, I just woke up in 6 months, I was completely out of business. And 6 months later, I filed bankruptcy. That was in 2001. And, I thought I had it made. I was 34 years old. I already had millions in the bank, and it came really nice and easy, and it went really nice and easy.
Wow. I remember going to the mall as a teenager, and there was a music store called something Cat. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Something Cat. It was a chain, regional chain, maybe. But anyway, there was and we'd always go and buy a single, like the tapes. Back we would buy tapes.
Single, yes,
the single.
Singles.
Yeah. So and then I remember when CDs started coming out, it's like, oh, what are these? I didn't have a CD player. And there was another music store that was really big in Nashville, and I can't remember the name of it. It was a big music store. Of course, they eventually went out of business. And if you remember, I think Blockbuster at one point had music stuff too, where you can go in and put the headphones on and listen.
Yeah, that was amazing. You could listen to the music before you bought it.
Exactly. It was cutting edge stuff. And boom, it went away. So at 34 years old, I mean, you've been in harm's way as a Marine. You've built a company, you've been in harm's way building a company, and you've made it successful, and you're making tons of money and everything's good. But seemingly overnight, the rug gets ripped out from under you. And that's, nobody could see that coming. What were the emotions like when you filed for bankruptcy? When you filled out that paperwork and sat down, I don't know if you were married at the time, but if you did, like you and your wife sit down and fill that out, tell us about that emotion, because I think a lot of people maybe listening have had to experience that or are thinking about having to experience that. What was that like?
It felt really unfair, right? That was the thing I remember. And it was a lot of why me? Why this happened to me? The week before, seemingly metaphorically, the week before I was, in my Benz, going to the nightclub and promoting records, and then go to the studio afterwards and party all night and go to bed and wake up at 1 and get ready to do it all over again, and just having a blast with no real concern about what things cost. And then the next day, seemingly, I'm bagging groceries and taking my lunch breaks with 16-year-olds for $7 an hour. And just like, what happened? At that time, I was still driving my Benz to the grocery store. I hadn't had to give it up yet. So it was this weird thing. And so it was a lot of why me, a lot of a huge pity party ever. And I'm, in hindsight, I'm like, I feel a little, not embarrassed, but just kind of disappointed in myself that that's the route I took. But I was definitely playing the victim. And that type of mentality today drives me bananas. And maybe it's because of my personal experience. But that's what it felt like.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
I finally got it. It's the brand new Relay credit card. So check it out. I'm gonna do a little unboxing for you so you can check this out. So here we go. Nice little case, kind of like the American Express. They're not playing. They're doing it right. Oh, look at this. There's a quote right inside. It says, "Success is having to worry about every damn thing in the world except money." Johnny Cash. That's pretty good. I've not heard that one. Oh, this is nice. A little thing on the back, up to 1.5% cash back, no annual fees or interest, 30-day billing cycle. And there it is. It's the Relay credit card. It's a Visa. So I'm not going to show you my number, but there it is. Look at that. Boom. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/relay.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
So you use the word embarrass. I want to dig into that a little bit. I think for a lot of people I talk to on this show, and my own experience as well, I think a lot of the times when entrepreneurs like you, like me, or like others that are in the middle of a failure moment or a failure season, seems like eternity. How much do you believe that the pain of the emotion going through that was really tied to that embarrassment more than it was the loss? It was more about the embarrassment. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the embarrassment it came on multiple levels. One is because I might have been a little too big for my britches, previously, and was kind of embarrassed of maybe the things that I had said and things that I had done. My family is they're all a bunch of civil servants, lots of police officers and firefighters and aerospace engineer, government employee types in my family, not a single entrepreneur among them. And I've always been kind of the black sheep in that context. And I know my grandma was always just like, "Can you just get a real job? Can you just get a real job? In the meantime, I'm the wealthiest one in the family." Right. And then there was a day when I'm bagging groceries and my high school girlfriend came through the checkout line, and I'm sitting there at the end of the lines having to say paper or plastic. And she was like, "Oh, Matt, it's so good to see you. How are things going?" And I'm just like,
What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, living my dream. I finally made it. But yeah, the embarrassment was significant.
I believe that if all of us kind of analyze the emotion of the pain of failure as entrepreneurs, a lot of it goes back to that shame, that embarrassment, because we have built something significant, and now we're in the process of losing it. And we, more than the losing it, of course, losing it sucks, but it's the pain of what you think other people think about you.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a hypnotherapist that I work with on a pretty regular basis. One of the things he's taught me is that other people's opinions of me are none of my concern. And man, that's so refreshing and so rejuvenating. It's like when I'm in the moment where I think there's shame, there's embarrassment. What difference does it make what other people?
Right.
It doesn't
I love
matter
that
what they think, right?
Yeah.
Did you go through that as well?
Yeah. And as I got older, I started to really embrace that type of idea. You look at here's a perfect example. You look at someone as famous as Prince, right? I mean, just adored and massive presence and household name and great music. And I was such a huge fan. And when he passed away, I mean, we talk about it for 3 or 4 days, and then everybody just moved on. For like a single person to have that type of impact on the world, and you could, choose Michael Jackson, choose Kobe Bryant, right? Choose any mega star that's passed, and they just kind of like, we move on with our life. And you can look at them. We just came through this really, divisive political season, and one of the candidates will, mess up and get something out over the microphone that they shouldn't have said, and then the next day the other candidate will do something, and we totally forgot about that one already when it was like the tragedy yesterday. And when you start taking how society works or how they process that type of stuff, and then you start applying it to your own life, you're like, tomorrow's a new day, and no one will give a damn.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. I've always thought about, life. God knows everything that's happened, everything that's going to happen, and I don't think that He's orchestrating it. I don't believe that, but like He knows. He's watched the movie. He's seen everything to the end, and as He sees in the middle where you make this big screw up, you done something bad, because He's also seen the end of the movie. He's like, yeah, it's going to be fine. We don't have that perspective, so we're in the middle of the mess, in the middle of the crap, middle of the storm. We can't see what's going to happen. But if you could go back to yourself, like it's been 23, 24 years since all that happened, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you could go back to yourself at 34, what would you tell yourself at 34 in the middle of that storm?
It's not as bad as it seems, and this too shall pass, and the best is yet to come. I see so many wasted moments of where I was just down and depressed and chose not to go have fun, right? And chose not to be self-expressed, chose not to be carefree and be myself and live in the moment. It's just countless days like that. And I look back, I was like, I could have been happier, I could have been sad, and I would have had the exact same result of that day. And maybe if I was happy, it would have been a better, different result. So I would definitely, and I apply that to myself today when I have a bad day. I'm like, hey, remember that day? Remember the advice you would have given yourself? Because I've had that conversation internally. So that's what I'd go back and say. And I think that's true pretty much for anyone. I think it's a really empowering belief to live by. This too shall pass, and the best is yet to come.
Yeah. Somebody said, it'll all be all right in the end. So if it's not all right, it ain't the end. so it's pretty good advice. So now
I think Zig Ziglar said, what are you worried about? None of us are getting out alive anyway. Right?
Now I think one of the keys to your success was the fact that you were actually at that grocery store bagging groceries, because it was the manager of the grocery store who clued you in on this idea of passive real estate income, which is now what you've built this next half of your life on, is this idea. And you're helping, lots and lots of people do the same thing. So I think the quote was your manager said, passive income is the final frontier where the average person has a legitimate shot at creating real wealth. And I think you said for the first time that it was like, oh, I'd never even thought about that. So what happened after he told you that? What did you go do?
Well, just to clarify and correct that statement, it was real estate is the final frontier where the average person has a legitimate shot at creating real wealth. And, there's some very key words in that statement. When he said the final frontier, as I'm in search of what's my next move, I was like, well, gosh, if that's the final one, I guess I better take that seriously. And I knew nothing about it at the time. And then he said for the average person, and here I am 34 years old, bagging groceries, feeling far below average. So who am I to aspire above that? And then to create real wealth. And at that point in my life, I really missed my money. I wanted my money back. So those were just kind of like, that was a magic sentence for me. And I've said it 1,000 times since, and I'll continue to say it because at the time I didn't know whether it was true or not, but I didn't have anything else to work with. But in hindsight, I think there's a lot of validity to it. So
what did you do with that advice? I mean, it obviously meant a lot to you,
mm-hmm.
and it's guided your life ever since. Over the last 23, 24 years, what did you do with it? I mean, did you go out and buy a duplex the next day? Did you hawk your Mercedes? Like, what did you do with it?
Well, I did what I thought was the logical thing to do. I became a real estate agent. I went home that night and just Googled everything real estate. I was like, I got to figure out what this final frontier works. And I found an estranged aunt that lived, I don't know, she was like, I hadn't seen her in 15, 16 years. And she lived probably 2 cities over. And just by Googling stuff, I'd come across her name, and, she had been the #1 agent there for 27 years or something like that. So I was deep into a bottle of wine and had a little bit of liquid courage into me and just fired off an email to her. Like, let's see what happens. And, and she responded in the morning, and we had lunch that day. She was really happy to hear from me. And I was in real estate school within 24 hours as an agent. So
Wow.
that was the actual movement or the actions that were taken. And then it took me about 3 or 4 years to figure out, you know what? If this is really the final frontier where all this money is going to happen, I think I'm sitting on the wrong side of the desk.
Mm.
I had a couple clients that were investors, and after a while of working with them, I got to just kind of look at the paperwork and the closing statements and compare my commissions to their profits. And I was like, you know what? I think I'd rather do what they're doing. So that's how that transition happened.
So you become an agent, you start selling. Where were you living at the time?
I was living in Palos Verdes, California, but I
Okay.
was driving to Long Beach, California, where my aunt lived, was where I was practicing real estate.
Okay. So you're doing real estate, you're learning how to, learning the deal, learning how to make and buy and sell real estate from the wrong side of the desk, as you put it. So now you're running programs called Epic Real Estate.
Mm-hmm.
And what does Epic Real Estate do, just in a like a snapshot? What is it that you're doing now?
What we do is we show busy professionals how to build real estate portfolios in their spare time so that they can retire early. And we have it divided kind of into two departments. Between I teach more of the hands-on, this is how you go out and do it yourself. And then my wife, she runs what's called a turnkey operation. And so she goes out and she facilitates everything for people that don't have the desire or really the time to go do it themselves. So those are the how we serve our people.
So as you're teaching people how to do this, if you look back at your journey where you started with your aunt as an agent, you said it took you 2 or 3 years before you realized, whoa, I need to be on the other side of the table. When you shifted to the other side of the table and you started as an investor, how long before you got back to the former financial status that
Yeah,
you had?
that's a great question because it was a different path. I was introduced to this book somewhere in there. I doubt if you've ever heard of it. It's really rare. You might want to write this down. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Have you heard of this book?
No,
And
never, never.
never, right? So that book had two key lessons in it for me. One, it gave me a new definition of wealth, right? I thought, based on my music and entertainment industry stuff experience, that wealth was just having a lot of money in the bank, and that was a different definition of wealth. It's not a lot of money in the bank; it's having enough money coming in, whether it's connected to your personal actions or not, that cover your monthly expenses, right? And I was like, it's an interesting definition of wealth. And you've defined it by how many days of the month can you survive without working. So are you 14 days wealthy, 15 days wealthy? Like, when will your income actually run out and not be able to pay your expenses for that month? So that was one key thing. The second one was just the concept of passive income. I speak English. I can take the words passive. I can take the word income. I can put those together and kind of figure out what it means. But to be taught it as an actual intention to pursue, right, was something brand new for me. And having already, even with having the 7-figure bank account in the music business, and that was pretty consistent, I still had to go to work every day, right? I was only good as my next release. So it was still a hustle. And, it took me about 3.5 years to get my passive income to exceed my monthly expenses. And I wasn't rich by any means. I wasn't back to my financial status. But for the first time in my life, I was free. I did not have to work. And having experienced both, I think I actually preferred that one.
Yeah. Well, I think that perspective, Matt, is missed by a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs as they're trying to come up in the same, because they're lied to by the YouTube gurus and the Instagram gurus and the TikTok gurus. It's all about the hustle and grind. It's all about making money. It's all about, getting more revenue. And in reality, it's about getting more time. And I love, Rich Dad, Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lecter, who wrote that, as they defined it, it's like, how much time can you have without having to work? That's the measurement of wealth, where you could have 7-figure income but have to work 60 hours a week, or you could have maybe a high 5-figure income but have to work 1 day a month.
Mm-hmm.
Like, which life would you rather have? I think Mark Cuban was famously quoted on camera saying, I would rather work for myself and make 50 grand a year than work for someone else and make a couple hundred. And I think all entrepreneurs would second that. But it's the idea of having this income coming in to give you time. That's
Yeah.
the measurement. So when you're working with your students in Epic Real Estate, what are you seeing in terms of how long it takes them to get past that hump to make that type of passive income?
Mm-hmm. Once I had achieved that goal for myself, my network, my family, my friends were like, wait a minute, you were just, bagging groceries a few years ago, and now you're playing golf on a Tuesday. How'd you do that? And I told them, I got a lot of like, oh, bullshit, that didn't really happen. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it type thing. But in my mind, I was thinking, God, knowing what I know now, I could do it a lot faster. Like 3.5 years was like, that actually took a long time based on what I know now. And so when I work with my students, I mean, I've had students do it in, 12 months, 8 months. Corey in Erie, Pennsylvania, I mean, he 24 years old and he retired himself and his dad and bought his dream house on a lake like in 13 months.
Whoa.
So I have a lot of stories just like that. And I've got several students that are far wealthier than I am. But then I have a few students that, it took them a while, and they hung in there and I hung in there with them. And, 2 years, 3 years later, it finally clicked, right? And like, it might've taken them a while to get that first deal under their belt. But, all of a sudden it just really accelerated and they're out in 3, 4, 5 years. So I don't have a lot of those stories because a lot of people give up and quit before then. But, if you just follow the process, it's achievable for anybody. And, we all come from different different backgrounds. We have different experiences. We have different resources available to us. We have different work ethics. We have different time available. But what I do know is if you just follow the steps, everybody will achieve it. Just, everybody grows at a different speed.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
As an entrepreneur running multiple businesses, effective communication is critical for me. I've tried all kinds of outreach tools over the years, but none have compared to Dubb when it comes to driving real results, and that's DUBB. I was one of Dubb's first users. I think it was like 7 years ago when they first launched, and I've been a loyal customer ever since. Dubb has completely transformed my prospecting, my client communication strategy, and here's why. Dubb makes it simple to record personal video messages and share them across email, SMS, social media, and more. And this brings back the face-to-face connection that's missing from most digital outreach. And what happens is my prospects instantly feel more engaged when they can put my face to my name. I end up building a stronger relationship faster by incorporating these video messaging into my workflow. Dubb also provides tracking and analytics so I can see exactly who engages with my videos and how they respond to them. Their automation and their CRM features help me nurture leads and close more deals. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, right, as entrepreneurs. So after using Dubb for years, I absolutely can't recommend them enough. I mean, Ruben, those guys over there are phenomenal. I love Darius. They're all great guys. It's become an invaluable tool that I depend upon to run my businesses efficiently. And if you want to boost your outreach and see amazing results like I have, head over to therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb. That's DUBB, and you can try it completely for free. No credit card required. You get the first 50% off your first 2 months, by the way, if you use my link. You need to take your prospecting to the next level with video messaging from Dubb. They're my go-to sales communication platform for nearly 7 years and counting. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb. Try it for free, no credit card required, and you'll get 50% off your first 2 months as well.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
So Corey it's Corey, right? In
Yeah.
Erie, Pennsylvania. So Corey, if you're watching this, man, you should also reach out to me. Let's get you on the show. Let's talk about what you did. We'll get it from the horse's mouth, as they say. But what was it about what Corey did that allowed him to accelerate that? I have a 24-year-old son, and I would love to see my son be able to do that. So what did he do? Walk me through a little bit of that. You don't have to go into the details, but like what happened? What did he do?
Well, it's kind of the key things that we do as real estate investors is we don't shop on the multiple listing service or on Zillow, right? Where the masses are all looking. We go where there's not as many people, and that's off market. And so about 7% of the houses sold every year are sold by people in some form of distress and where they actually need to sell. They just don't want to sell. And so we're able to market directly to them and send messages to them, and some will respond. And and we're able to give them quick cash and help them out of their situation, sometimes help solve even bigger problems that a traditional sale through a real estate agent just wouldn't do, right? They can't wait for that. They don't want to do with that. They need a quicker solution. So that's how we go and do it. And then we use what are called creative acquisition strategies. So very rarely do we ever go to a bank and get the money. We work with maybe the existing loan that's already on the property, taking over the property subject to the existing financing. Or we make payments to the seller over time where we actually give them more money over time than we could give them all cash in a lump sum. And once you're just armed with a few of those techniques or strategies, and then you know how to go out and find the people that are open to those ideas, and that's really the win-win for them, then it's just about repetition. So that's how it starts, and that's really, you just keep on doing that over and over again.
So with your experience of going from successful entrepreneur to bagging groceries, back to successful entrepreneur again, you've been to the mountaintop, the valley, and back to the mountaintop. What do you believe, Matt, has been your key that allowed you to unlock success?
I think it was, success came to me so easily, like without even thinking about success, without having to have to define it and, get up and be disciplined and exercise the money-making habits and all that stuff. It just happened. But I think a big turning point was when, after about 6 months of bagging groceries and my pity party was coming to an end, and realizing, hey, no one's coming to save me. No one's going to do it for me. Right. So if I want it, I've got to go do it myself. And so I needed that 6 months to let reality of the real world of how most people live sink in, and okay, well, I got to go do it. There's a lot of great people around me, no shortage of shoulders willing to allow me to cry on them, no shortage of people to pat me on the back and, Matt, it's going to be okay. I get all the encouraging words and everything, but no one was doing it for me. So I think I was like, okay, I have to have a plan and I have to run through a process. And one of my reference points for that was when I was in the Marine Corps, and, in 3 months of boot camp, everyone jumps off that bus not knowing their ass from a hole in the ground about being a Marine. But there you have these drill instructors that are there to guide you, and they got 3 months to turn you into a Marine. They have a daily schedule, and you just do the steps every single day, whether you want to or not. And when you come out at the end, boom, you're a Marine. And I just kind of referencing that process and always being able to draw on that was a very clear thing for me. Just create the plan, do one day at a time, and eventually you're going to graduate. And that's probably the key to the success.
So how do you define success? What does success mean to Matt Theriault?
I think you kind of go in and out of success, right? I don't know if success is a thing to have. Either you're in it or you're out of it. And you just want to be in it more than you're not. And I know I'm being successful when I'm not wishing I was doing something else.
Oh, wow. That's deep, man. Listen, I've asked 260, almost 270 people that question. You're the first person ever that I remember ever answering, what's the definition of success, is like when I'm doing stuff and I'm not thinking about it. I wish I was doing something else. That's pretty good. Now, by that definition, though, do you consider yourself successful?
Yes, because you're a rock star, Jason. I'm happy to be here.
I love it. Love it. So now, as we get ready to finish out this conversation, it's a good conversation. I'm going to let people know how to get in touch with you and all that good stuff. But what is your best piece of advice for entrepreneurs? So they're looking at whether it's creating passive income, creating a big business, creating high top line revenue. What would you say? Somebody's been to the top, been to the bottom, been to the top again. What's your best piece of advice?
I think I probably got three. Gosh, there's so many, right? And that's why there's so many books on becoming successful entrepreneurs. I think one of the real hacks is being very intentional around who you spend your time with. Being intentional about creating your environment. I wish they would have taught me the concept in high school. They would have taught me the concept of masterminding. If you don't come from a rich family, you're not automatically born into a rich network. You can buy your way in, right? And that just, if I look at all the masterminds that I've belonged to, I've probably spent $100,000 a year on just being a part of networks and gatherings and events. And you know, you find yourself in different conversations with different people. People are optimistic and big thinkers, and people that don't shoot down your crazy ideas. And then you've got the connections there to actually take those ideas and fulfill on them, and you've got the resources to pull it all together. God, I had 10 answers I wanted to give you right away, but I think that would probably be the one, and that'll lead to the rest.
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, congratulations on your rise and fall and rise again. I think without the fall, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing today. I mean, obviously the record store would have gone by the wayside, eventually, but maybe if you hadn't ended up at that grocery store, we wouldn't be on this show talking today. Maybe something else would have happened. But what was the grocery store's manager's name? Do you remember?
Clarence.
So big shout out to Clarence if he's still with us. Like, look at what you've done, man. That one comment. And what's funny is Clarence probably showed up in a Camry. You showed up in a Benz. And he was the one, that was giving you the advice. So never judge somebody based on what they're driving or wearing. Big thanks for Matt, for you to be on the show. I want to tell everybody how to get in touch with you. Go to epicrealestate.com. That's epicrealestate.com. You can look him up on TikTok at Epic Real Estate, or on LinkedIn. You can look him up by his name, Matt Theriault. And the last name is spelled Theriault. Theriault, Matt Theriault. And he's got a special offer here. He's got a book called My Escape Book at myescapebook.com. You can get it for $4 as a listener to this show if you go to myescapebook.com. Plus, you're going to get a free Rich Dad course. Remember, we talked about that book that nobody had ever heard of earlier, the Rich Dad and Poor Dad. So, Matt, again, thank you for being on the show, man. It's an honor to know you and have you on the show. Congratulations on your success, and I hope we cross paths again soon.
Me too. Thank you, Jason. God loves you, and so do I.
Amen. Well, there you have it. Another successful entrepreneur talking about his journey to success. And I love stories where there's success, failure, and success again, because that's really that second bite of success is the one that usually sticks. It's the one that we like the most. It tastes better, feels better, smells better. It's a better experience. So if you haven't failed yet, don't go out and fail on purpose, but if you're going to fail, just know that someday it's going to turn into something great. If you stop in the middle of the failure, then you are a failure. Don't stop, keep moving. And if you want to understand how real estate can take you to that level of passive income, as we say, like the final frontier where the average person has a legitimate shot at creating real wealth, reach out to Matt. Go to epicrealestate.com. Check that out. Make sure you tune in again next time on The Root of All Success, when I'll interview yet another very successful person on his or her journey to success. As always, until next time, I am the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.